This week on The Other Side, interest rates are going nowhere and the economy is in real trouble. We'll take you inside the mood of Aussie business with building entrepreneur Scott Challen, a.k.a. Chow, and what this means for you, the economy, housing and jobs. And we've just had NIDOC week, an overload of at-sea culture. But does it actually help any Indigenous people in a meaningful way? Or does it just make woke people feel better about themselves? Alexandra Marshall will join me to discuss all that. We are back from our mid-year break, and it's time you got the other side of the story. G'day Adelaide, g'day Taree, g'day Australia. This is episode 417 of The Other Side for the week commencing Friday, July 11, 2025. I'm Damian. The Other Side's your deep dive on the important issues that matter in Australia and that affect us from around the world from a different perspective. A new show drops every Friday night at 7 p.m. and clips from our Friday night shows drop throughout the following week, most nights at around 7, so you can watch any way you like. If you like what you see, please do support us by signing up for free. We have a newsletter at OthersideTV.com.au, OthersideTV.com.au, and you can, if you choose, support us financially too. It's up to you. OthersideTV.com.au. Check it out. So the Reserve Bank has decided to keep interest rates on hold and not drop the base rate lower than 3.85% this month. Who knew? Well, we did. We've been saying on this show for years now that the idea of interest rates coming down in any meaningful and consistent way anytime soon in Australia is just a nonsensical pipe dream, and it sure isn't ever going to happen while most of the country keeps voting for left-wing ideas and governments. And that's probably not going to stop anytime soon if you talk to most people under 40 these days, unfortunately. It's no secret that, like many of you who watch this show, I was gutted by the result of this year's election. Labor having gained a majority in the House of Representatives, picking up 17 seats to win with 94 seats, absolutely annihilating the Liberal National Party coalition by more than doubling their tally. The coalition only kept 43 seats. Not only do Albo and Jimbo and co have a big majority, but within the Labor Party itself now in the Parliament, we have more MPs from the party's dangerous left-wing faction than we've had since the disastrous Whitlam era half a century ago. And there'll be no checks and balances coming from the upper house, the Senate, either. Labor has 29 Senate seats now, and the Greens have 10. That gives the left a combined total of 39, which is a clean majority in the 76-seat Senate chamber. And it gives the Greens a lot of power. Laws have to pass both houses of Parliament, remember. But far, far, far worse than the very left-wing state of our Labor Party in the House of Reps, or the combined frightening left-wing state of the Labor-Green majority in the Senate, far worse than all of that is the fact that we seem to have almost zero opposition. The most depressing thing for me and for many Aussies in the sensible centre and centre-right is the fact that the Liberal Party has made a clear decision, and the National Party is following along, that there will be no serious opposition or viable alternative centre-right views forcefully put. They're just going to be listening. And as a good friend of this show put it to me this week, listening is what politicians do when they don't actually know what to do. Now, look, listening is fine in leadership and management. It's the first stage of any decision-making process. If you want to be healthy, you listen to people. But you also need the second stage of leadership, and that's decision-making. And it requires some core values to measure those decisions against. And it's the core values that the modern Liberal Party of Susan Ley seems to be lacking. So what was Susan Ley spending her time focused on this week? Not the economy, the culture wars of the left. She was virtue signalling and doing identity politics stuff, all the stuff that the right side of politics should have nothing to do with.
I said when I became leader that we would listen carefully, stand by our values, fix our policies, and work very, very hard for the Australian people. Today's listening exercise to members of the Chinese communities is very much part of that. And what we were all able to emphasise is that it's just the beginning of an ongoing dialogue. I want to say, as I said in the room just now, how much we value our Chinese communities in this country.
There's nothing quite like the beginning of an ongoing dialogue to excite everybody, is there? Chinese immigration in Australia goes back about 7 generations to the gold rush era. We need to stop with this multicultural nonsense. It's actually racist. We're all Australians, and the more you divide us on our race, the more you play into the hands of white supremacy. You don't reduce racism, you increase it. By talking about Chinese Australians as a single group, you imply that they're different and must all think the same way. I'm a 3rd-generation Australian of Irish and Lebanese mixed descent. What am I going to be described as? Australian, I hope. Chinese Australians are not a blob to be won over by an opportunistic political party. They're as diverse as any Australians. Many detest communism, especially those from Taiwan or Hong Kong backgrounds, and some like Labor. Chinese family values and business values reflect the Liberal Party and conservative values quite naturally. The question the Liberal Party should be asking itself is, what are its values? What values does it represent? And stick to that. Sell that to the electorate, no matter what their background might be. Stuff the identity politics. So that was Susan Ley this week. What about her economics team? Were they doing anything? Ted O'Brien is Susan Ley's shadow treasurer. He's the man who'd be treasurer if she ever becomes Prime Minister. It's his job to challenge and hold Jim Chalmers' feet to the fire. This is how he did that after the rates announcement this week in an email to Liberal Party members. Today, millions of Australians will be disappointed that interest rates are not coming down. Australia has had just 2 interest rate reductions after 12 interest rate increases under Labor. By comparison, interest rates have fallen 3 times in the USA, 4 times in the UK, 6 times in New Zealand, 7 times in Canada, and 8 times in the Euro area. The average mortgage holder in Australia is paying around $1,900 more per month in additional interest payments than when Labor came to office. Okay, good info, good attack on the government there, Ted. But what are you going to do about it? As the Reserve Bank has recognised, public sector spending is leading to homegrown inflation. Labor's latest budget shows Australia in deficit for at least the next 10 years. Until Labor starts reinstalling budget responsibility, it will make the Reserve Bank's job harder. Well said, Ted. Could be a heck of a lot stronger than that, though, and a lot more colloquial so people can really understand it. Something like, the government's ripping you off and spending too much of your money. That might sound a bit better, and I'm eager to find out. Also, still, what are you going to do about it? The Liberals will listen and ensure we present a strong alternative. This starts with a strong economy so everyday Australians can get ahead. Regards, Ted O'Brien, Shadow Treasurer. Oh, okay. That's it. We'll listen and provide a strong alternative. Well, how about something like this? The country's in crisis, the economy is in serious trouble, and we need radical reform of government overspending and taxing, getting in the way of business people to grow their businesses, grow the pie, create jobs, and actually fix things. No such message from the supposed party of small business, the supposed party of medium-sized enterprises and job creation, the party of lower taxes, the party of smaller government and more liberty and freedom and wealth creation and sustainable social services like Medicare and the NDIS being run efficiently and well-funded by a healthy, growing, real value-creating economy. Where is that old Liberal Party? Where's it gone? All of this uni-party nonsense is playing right into Labor's hands. This week, they made Treasurer Jim Chalmers look holier than thou. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is striving for a new era of collaboration and compromise from politicians, unions and business leaders for generational fiscal reform, reported news.com via MSN. His comments come as Mr Chalmers unveiled the first group of people taking part in the Economic Reform Roundtable in August, the story continues. The Treasurer invited Shadow Treasurer Ted O'Brien into the roundtable in a move to achieve cross-party consensus. Isn't that lovely? Might sound nice, folks, but the thing is that our democracy, our political system, our Westminster parliamentary system, it's built upon the idea of having a strong opposition. The opposition's job is not to be all nice and kumbaya and work in harmony with the government. That's how communist countries work. That's how government gets too big and too fat and too lazy and ultimately very, very corrupt. In our system, it's the job of His Majesty's opposition, as they call it in the UK, to deliberately challenge, to deliberately and proactively bring conflict to ensure that we get the checks and balances that we need. Because progress and growth and improvement and innovation and learning do not always come from kumbaya harmony. They often are born out of difficulty and challenges and conflict. And we want peaceful conflict in a chamber of parliament. That's what the Westminster system's all about. We don't want violent conflict on our streets, which is what you get when half the population gets no voice in a peaceful parliament. So no, Ted and Susan and Angus and co, we do not want to see you holding hands with the Labor Party and the Greens in a festival of love. But it's not looking good. They've chosen the most left-wing leader they could possibly choose in Susan Ley. She's set a clear direction for a modern approach, a clear slap in the face or direct punch in the nose, really, to all of the Conservatives inside and outside her party, that this modern Liberal Party is not your party. And given there doesn't seem to be an alternative centre-right party that has a broad front bench of talent and deep tentacles in the community and wide national appeal, sadly, the centre-right and right in this country is now in a very bad place indeed. The only thing that's going to save us now is economic pain and shock. And I'm afraid it's coming. It has to. Economic truths are like gravity. They're just facts. Doesn't matter what your 20-something woke son or little sister wishes was the way that the world worked. The reality is that without innovation, discipline, a strong work ethic, stoicism, determination, humility, a willingness to shut up, listen and learn and then make decisions and take bold action, support for risk-taking, low taxes, minimal government interference and massive support for business, our productivity will continue to plummet, no matter how many talk fests that Jim Chalmers and Elbow wants to host. And productivity, folks, productivity is everything. Without productivity, we can't have nice things. Because without people supported to create wealth, there can be no wealth creation. And without wealth creation, there can be no wage rises for workers and no tax revenue for the government. And without that, the economy is stuffed and all our social services will go down the drain. If wage rises happen without productivity increases, inflation must result. You can't pay people more without the cost of making stuff going up, unless you get increased productivity. And if the cost of making stuff goes up, prices go up. And the wage rises become meaningless because you've got to pay more for the stuff. This is not a political argument, remember, right? It's just like physics. It's just scientific, fact-based reality. And if inflation keeps going up, interest rates are never coming down. Because the main measure used to decide whether interest rates come down by the Reserve Bank of Australia is inflation. The Reserve Bank is tasked with ensuring that it doesn't do anything that might contribute to inflation going outside the 2 to 3% band that it tries to keep it within. So if inflation's above 3%, rates won't come down. The problem is, as we've said on this show many times, our inflation data, the headline CPI number, the Consumer Price Index, it's counted on a basket of goods used to measure inflation. But critics say that the basket has got things in it that it shouldn't have, and it doesn't have things in it that it should have. That politicians and bureaucrats aren't giving us the real picture on inflation. The CPI is officially at 2.1%. But do you really think when you're putting petrol in your car at $2.30 a litre and buying a coffee for $7 and tomatoes for $13 a kilo and paying the rent or your mortgage, that inflation is actually 2.1%? The big surprise for me about the Reserve Bank Governor's news conference this week wasn't the decision to hold rates at 3.85%. It was her comments about the CPI being perhaps not so reliable as an indicator of real inflation. Listen carefully to this. She's answering a question here about why some of the RBA board members voted for a rate cut while the majority voted against it. But have a listen to what she says about the CPI data.
Reasonable people can differ in their interpretations of data. And I think there was a couple of things. One was the labour market data and another was the monthly CPI data. And a lot of people focused on the headline CPI number at 2.1%, but we don't think inflation in a sustainable way is that low. We think it's higher. So our interpretation of the data, I think, was a bit different. And opportunities like this, for me, to communicate that, I think is very helpful.
Whoa. I really respect Michelle Bullock now. She knows how to speak the truth and isn't afraid to. She has just said there, very cautiously and diplomatically, as she's got to, given her job, that the CPI is not an accurate indicator of inflation. So that is what our journalists should be focused on now, hammering the bureaucrats and politicians about what they're going to do to fix the very manipulated way in which we measure inflation in this country. The basket of goods is a basket case. If you like The Other Side, one of the best ways you can support us is by signing up for the products of our sponsors. And one of our best sponsors is PIAV, the virtual private network that stops people spying on your internet activity. It'll keep you and your family truly safe from the prying eyes of big governments and corporations without slowing down your internet speeds. And you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. You can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and you'll get the discount. And you'll get more info on those special deals if you check it out. That's piavpn.com/otherside. One of the places where the real inflation reality is felt most and first in Australia is in our building industry, and that will impact everyone eventually in the higher costs of housing. Building materials and skills shortages leading to higher labour costs are all putting price pressure on projects. Red tape and green tape from governments, especially upstart local government in this country, are adding massive unnecessary costs that are hurting everyone at the end of the day. And they're not really adding that much benefit when it comes to safety or service improvements. It's just bureaucratic waste. The highly respected business journalist Robert Leeson wrote earlier this year in The Australian that Australia has a very broken building industry. And he says lowering interest rates isn't going to help get housing costs down because it'll just increase demand. And if you're going to increase demand, you've got to first fix the building industry so it can meet that demand. The article was called Warning Signs of an Impending Building Industry Collapse. Mr. Gottliebsen says the hardest part is restoring the morale of the building industry because it's been so brutally battered by the ruthless treatment of federal, state and local governments. No industry can survive when 40% of the cost of their product can be attributed to government charges and imposed delays, he writes. And funding rules imposed by banks prevent financing in the industry. He writes that in each state, there's a myriad of bodies, often controlled by union-dominated local councils, that absolutely delight in delaying permission for a commercial or residential building development. Someone in the industry who's been speaking out loudly about the issues is the founder and CEO of the QHI building group, Scott Challen. Scott's become known for his Instagram and TikTok accounts and posts under the handle Chow, and he is with me now in the Other Side studio. Scott, we are very happy to have you with us. Good to see you here, mate.
Thank you very much, Damian. Pleasure to be here.
Been watching your stuff on online and following it under Chow. Very, very entertaining. Often working out at the gym while you're doing it, which is probably something I should think about doing. To serious matters, though, are we really facing a building industry collapse? That's pretty dramatic language from Robert Gottliebsen.
Yeah, great story too, and a really good journalist to highlight that. We're not facing it, we're in it. This is it. It's happening around us right now, and it has been happening for the last number of years now, especially since 2020. I don't think people realise how impactful this is on our industry right now, because from the outside it can look like it's still functioning, we're still getting things built, but internally all we see right now is collapse and pressure.
So how many people are going under? I mean, some of the statistics you've thrown up online are pretty scary.
Yeah, and I get accused of being a bit of a drama queen about it, but the reality is we've seen over 7,000 licensed building companies collapse in the last 2 years alone. And if you extrapolate that, that's one every 4 to 6 hours, of every single day since the Albanese government came into power.
God. Okay, licensed building companies being sometimes just individual tradies or...
Licensed as individuals, small to medium enterprises, and of course, who can forget some of the really big names like your ProBuilds and, other big volume home builders. Yeah.
Okay, so it is a serious situation. It's recognised as such within the industry.
Oh, we all know it. That's all we're talking about is how we are surviving. And, look, one of the things that really kicked off the content that I was making was the idea that we are hanging on by our fingernails right now. That's how the industry is, and it's been that way for a couple of years now.
Okay, what are the factors driving it then?
Well, look, it was the perfect storm, really, because if you took COVID, and no one would have expected anyone to start investing in their homes, but when you think about it now with hindsight, we're locked in at home, we're not allowed to leave, you've got kids around you, what are you going to do? You're going to create more space for yourself. So there was this huge drive to renovate and extend and build on. The government, to its credit, allowed the construction industry to still function during the pandemic. So, we could still work as a business. And so there was huge demand. And then there was the home builder stimulus as well. Let's not forget that our government printed billions and billions of dollars and then just pumped it into what was already an overheated industry. The building industry has been short of labour, heavy on bureaucracy for years before COVID happened. Layer all this in together, boom, perfect storm. And then we saw the material shortages.
Right. Okay, so you got lots of government stimulus going in, which is artificial, unfortunately. Helps for the short term, doesn't help in the long term.
Yep.
Then you've got the short term ends. And you've got a supply shortage and a labour shortage.
And a labour shortage. Now, all of that was coming to a head already. We were already dealing with those issues prior to 2020. And then, boom, out it comes even more. We just amplified that, turned it right up, and then everything really started to hit the wall in 22, 23. And that's when, of course, the inflation was just going through the roof. The Reserve Bank throws in 13 interest rate rises to try and tamper things down a little. And all we've seen as a result of that is building companies just, collapse because they weren't making any money. You signed a contract for a project for X amount of dollars. You've lodged it through building approval. At the same time, we increased the rules and regulations around the requirements for homes and what has to go into a home under the National Construction Code. And then all these builders had all these contracts signed for fixed prices with no profit in the jobs.
Yeah, right.
Bang.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, we need to talk more about the fixed price thing, but also just, the input costs of building materials and labour.
Yep.
But the biggest one is that government red tape, green tape. That's got to go if we're going to... when you've got the problem of the higher costs of building materials and labour, right? You can't afford that luxury. I want to play a clip that you posted recently with a guy called Don Cottrell, who's director of Sanctuary 28, a boutique residential construction firm on the Gold Coast. He's got over 30 years experience, big industry players out there speaking all the time. And he's very concerned about the labour costs question. I'll just play that clip that you shared last week, John.
Biggest danger for us out there at the moment is the cost of labour. It is just ridiculous. We're in this boom that we've come out of since COVID. And a lot of builders will tell you it's a non-profit boom that we're in at the moment, and builders just can't control price. Banks won't loan money to people who don't have a fixed price contract. So clients want you to lock a contract in. As builders, we don't want to lock a price down because, to be perfectly honest, in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months' time, we don't know what that's going to cost.
Yeah, labourers aren't going to like that story. You got some harsh reaction to it when you posted it.
I did, yeah.
But you rightly said, it's like we're all in this together. It's a bit of a disaster for everyone.
Well, it's easy as a builder to be pointing the finger at labour and labour pointing the finger back at the builder. But the reality is nobody's making any money. And if nobody's making any money, then who is making money right now?
So who is making money right now?
The government and the banks. Yeah, so
let's address that question he raised there, right? He was talking about the fact that you got a fixed price. Well, just explain that for a layperson like me. So if you've got a fixed price contract, the banks want you to have a fixed price contract because they want that guarantee, right?
Yep. So every business, the least amount of risk, highest amount of profit. And the Australian banking industry is one of the most profitable banking sectors in the world for a reason. And the reason is because we have really stable mortgages here. And so the banks want you to sign a contract with a builder for a fixed price so the bank knows exactly what the dollar figure is going to be. They've locked you in. They've locked the builder in. The bank doesn't care if the builder goes bust. The bank doesn't care if the builder doesn't make any profit. At the end of the day, the bank still holds the mortgage over the property, and the property will get a house on it eventually. So it will always be secured for them. Plus, you've also got to remember they've got their lender's mortgage insurance built into it as well. So they're protected. The bank is always protected. So from a builder's perspective, we want to be able to work with fluctuating material inputs, and that's where, this profit crunch has come from. When Don spoke about the profitless boom, that's exactly what it's been because material prices have gone up so much. But banks don't care whether the builder goes bust. They're still going to get
So wages are fairly high but fairly predictable. Yep. You're building in your materials, though. It's nuts, right, the volatility?
The volatility's been insane, and none of us knew that the majority of our timber that comes in that we build homes with was coming out of Ukraine. So, so Eastern European timber makes up a big part of the Australian building industry. Then we had bushfires on the East Coast. Then we had floods. We had COVID, supply chain shortages, labour shortages. There was a whole bunch of things that were happening all at once. Now, the Albanese government had a jobs and skills summit. I think it was 22, 23, something like that. And they decided to bring in a whole bunch of people to try and fill the skills crisis in this country. And what did we do? We just exacerbated the housing crisis.
Yeah.
So we didn't have enough homes for everyone. Yeah. And we're still in that, we're still dealing with that.
When you bring people in to do the work, you've got to give them a house to live in.
Yeah. Don in that video made a really good point about, the problems with making no money. The risk is all on the builder. We get a lot of feedback that people think that builders just collapse the company, wipe out the debt, then re-Phoenix themselves as another building company. But I've got a builder's license in 3 states, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. And trust me when I tell you that I had to jump through hoops that you wouldn't believe to get those licenses. So the concept to me...
And phoenixing is illegal, right? You can get caught for phoenixing.
100%.
It's like you're not allowed to just go bust and then come back.
It's not that simple.
No.
You can't just wipe your license out and then come back with a new license. Yeah. It's not how it works.
Unless you're Virgin Airlines or something. But anyway, that's another story. Someone might have got caught on that one that I know. Anyway, mate, stay there. We're not going away. We'll just take a quick break. We'll come back with Scott Challen.
You're watching The Other Side with Damian, Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month. This is The Other Side.
The head of the biggest Aussie super fund, AusSuper's Paul Schroeder, told an economic conference in Sydney this week that Australia's tax system is stupid and a massive disincentive to companies and business. If you run a national business in Australia at the moment, you have about 100 different taxes that you've got to pay. How stupid is that? So why don't we fix that, he said. Yeah, good question. Mr. Schroeder was responding to questions about why his super fund, like many others, invests so much in overseas companies. He said they have to get a return for their Aussie investors, and so they look for the best companies, not countries, to invest in. 70 cents in every dollar that AusSuper gets has to be invested overseas. But AusSuper has $90 billion invested in Australia, so that's a fairly big chunk. The sad reality is that we just aren't productive enough here. And a lot of that is because of the ridiculously high level of government we have. Too many rules and regulations. And as Mr. Schroeder said, 100 different taxes that you've got to pay if you run a national business in this country. It's a disgusting and immoral waste of our money by government overlords. It's something that our special guest this week has pointed out on his TikTok and X and Insta platforms under the handle Shallow Chow. You may know him from there. CEO and founder of the QHI National Building Company, Scott Challen. Scott, good to have you on the show. What is your take on those comments from the head of the head of Oz Super about the fact you've got to pay 100 taxes if you've got a national business? Is he overstating it a bit, or
No,
do you feel that way sometimes?
Look, it feels like there's a million taxes sometimes. When I look at the bills list every week in our companies, all I see is money going to government at 3 levels: state, federal, state, local, and federal. It's a consistent grind. It's really hard to do business in Australia with multi-layered bureaucracy. They've all got their fingers in the pie, and they're all trying to take more of it off you. It's constant.
We were talking about an article by Robert Leeson in the last segment about how 40% of the cost of a house
Up
is
to
basically
48 in New South Wales.
Oh my God, it's just insane. It's basically red tapes, money that the government's ripping off average Aussies, all these layers of government with all these crazy taxes. And red tape, green tape, rainbow tape, whatever. You've also got the banks. We talked about the difficulty with the banks and the fact that they're, getting a fair deal and nobody else is necessarily winning out from all of that. So everybody in the industry is getting kind of screwed over. The labourers and the building businesses are going bust and stuff. And, these taxes, 40 to 48%, a lot of that is coming from councils and their ridiculous rules. Robert Leeson saying we need strong state government leadership to get these councils into line and make them accountable to a centralised state minister. That's one of the things he reckons could help. That was done in Victoria a few years back. What do you see as the fix for all this nut job red tape?
I don't think there's any one simple fix, because I believe that these layers have been baked into this multi-leveled system over many generations now. These safety nets that we've built, and when you question regulation or you question compliance, you get accused of wanting to cut corners and wanting to be dodgy. It's just not the case. The point is, though, that we've built so much into this bureaucracy now that it's become restrictive. We can't move. We can't pivot. We can't put more people on quickly. We can't get rid of people if we need to. Businesses don't have the flexibility, and they're not nimble enough to be able to work in this economy. Oz Super have made a really good point there, that Australia's a hard place to do business because of all that,
Bloody hard.
that taxation. And
Mate, I don't know about you, but I've got plenty of friends our age who should be and would be normally, if it was any other generation, would be hiring 10 or 20 young people.
Yep.
And they've packed up and gone to the beach.
Yep.
Because they can't handle the labour laws, and they don't want to bother. It's just, there's no reward.
And then throw payroll tax on top of that as well. My business, 2022, we tripped into the payroll tax threshold, first time ever. Payroll tax in Queensland hasn't been indexed since 2018. It's the same rate now, 1.3 million, that it was in 2018. And look how much more we're paying people, from then to now. So there's all these little tripwires, all these little hazards that can catch you out. We made the mistake. It was just an admin error of being 3 days late paying our superannuation bill. We copped a $27,000 fine for that. We're a small to medium enterprise, and it was a simple admin error. It wasn't like we were trying to get out of paying super. 3 days late, bang, 27 grand, bang.
Yeah. And they make the rules up as they go along all the time.
That's what it feels like. And this is one of the main problems we have as small business, is keeping up with the rules. Now, why do I have to have a HR consultant within a company that employs, 10 to 20 people? I've got to have someone basically on retainer to help me manage the employees that I have, because the complexity of industrial relations and employment laws are so difficult now that I can't manage that kind of stuff. It's impossible.
We've got this culture too where people just kind of go, it's a safety issue. Government's keeping us safe. Government's good.
Yep.
Government's holy.
Yep.
Government's like some charity organisation. We've got to stop you evil business people, bastards ripping off workers. You've got to stop you ripping off punters and the people who are doing the ripping off are the bloody government. 40 to 48% of your cost of your house is going to the pockets of bloody bureaucrats. And we're sitting around attacking the small business people who are trying to get out there and have a go. Why would you bother?
Well, look, you borrow $1 million to build that home, right? $1 million, 48% of that is going in government taxes and charges at 3 levels of government. So that's half of it gone. Where are you getting the money from? You're borrowing it from the bank. You're repaying the mortgage on that $1 million, half of it being fees, taxes and charges over a 30-year mortgage. I mean, get your head around that.
That's insane.
Who's making money here? The government and the banks.
And the banks. And look, it is just complete nuts. And I think what people have got to wake up to, and we've all got to start to realise, and I try to keep reminding myself, every time someone turns around and says, we're going to screw that business guy, we're going to make sure that they're paying this or they're paying that, who ends up paying? The customer.
Yep.
Right. So it's not necessarily going to help the whole thing.
Well, this is why we have a non-productive economy, and we don't have any diversification within the market sectors that we have here now with what we do. We're District 9 of the Hunger Games, mate. We are literally
God help us.
we're farming and digging stuff out of the ground, and we don't manufacture anything anymore. All we can do is build houses here, and that's becoming harder and harder as well. I mean, the idea that we're going to manufacture solar panels or any of this green energy tech in Australia, it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. We don't have cheap energy. We have really difficult industrial relations laws. And like I said, as a small to medium enterprise, why do I have to have a HR company on retainer just to manage the number of employees that I have? It's nuts.
Yeah. One of my favourite online channels for really good reporting is TLDR. I think it's good to turn to an outside perspective outside of Australia for a summary on how Australia is going. They're a European outfit. And the reality is that we are in a recession in real terms by the metric that counts the most, which is GDP per capita. Yep. That's how much our economy grows per person, not the overall GDP, because that's cheating. You just bump that up with immigration, right? But when you break it down per capita, per head, you see that we actually are in a recession. Here's how TLDR explain that one.
While aggregate GDP has been growing steadily since late 2020, save for the third quarter of 2021, this is mainly a consequence of large amounts of immigration. And GDP per capita actually fell for 6 consecutive quarters between Q2 of 2023 and Q3 of 2024. While GDP per capita did apparently grow by 0.1% in the last quarter of 2024, according to the latest data, this was largely driven by a rise in exports as a consequence of what's known as front-loading, i.e. American companies importing as much stuff from Australia as they could before Trump's tariffs came into force. On top of this, quite a lot of this has been driven by a marked increase in government spending, which has risen from 21% of GDP in 2015 to a high of 28% last year. Without this increase in government spending, the country would have fallen into recession last year. The government has even burnt through its windfall and now expects to run budget deficits for the foreseeable future. While there's no chance of an acute debt crisis, after all, Australia's debt-to-GDP ratio stands at just 50%, earlier this year, one of the big credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, said it was considering downgrading Australia's AAA credit rating, citing a lack of fiscal responsibility and unsustainable tax and spend promises made by both parties during the election campaign.
Yeah, it's a pretty grim bloody picture, isn't it? It's and it's all government propped up. The fact that we even got out that little bit of a blip there in the last quarter of last year. First quarter of this year, though, we're back down again.
That's horrific.
So we are in a serious recession, I reckon. And
well, it's long overdue. We've kicked the can down the road for long enough now. There's a correction that's required. But, look, no government wants to be a part of that correction process. And that's political suicide, right?
Let's just talk quickly about your apprenticeship stuff. I noticed you did a clip on that recently too, and we've got this apprenticeship scheme that came out of the Future Made in Australia plan of $10,000 for young apprentices to train in residential housing industry. Yeah. It's a bit of throwing a Band-Aid at the problem.
Yeah.
But you had an interesting story too about a young fellow whose mum asked you to hire him as an apprentice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get people reaching out to me all the time, saying would I be interested in putting an apprentice on, especially, kids these days aren't that great with their social skills. Their parents reach out, and I don't have a problem with that. Look, good lady I know, really good friend, her son, had done the license, had done the hours, the learner's permit, the hours, the lessons, all the rest of it.
For his driver's license.
For his driver's license. Right. Failed his driver's license 3 times and couldn't, and as a consequence of not having a driver's license, couldn't get an apprenticeship with a company like mine, purely because we need them to be able to drive around southeast Queensland. From Brisbane, we need them to be able to go 100 kilometres in any direction. So he was struggling to find an apprenticeship because he couldn't get a driver's license. Now, what's this barrier that we've built for these kids to try and get into the job market? Well, it's getting a license. Now, I'm in my early 50s. I know I don't look like it, but being in my early 50s.
Marvellous, mate. Marvellous.
Being in my early 50s, I walked into transport at the age of 17 on my 17th birthday, did my driver's test and walked out with my licence that afternoon. I hadn't had any formal lessons and I was ready for the workforce. That's what we came from. We had a society where kids could step into the workforce and get a driver's licence really easy.
There was also the police station at Stratty. If
There
you were
was.
really desperate.
100%. Yeah, and I'm the first to admit that I went to a country police station, the local copper, and he took me around the block and I got my licence. We're driving cars that have never been better, never been safer, but we've created even bigger roadblocks for kids to be able to get a driver's license. So this is a really simple one for me.
It's another example of how the keeping you safe economy.
Yep.
Yeah, we're keeping you safe. We're keeping it. All this regulation and red tape is well intentioned, I guess, but it's just creating a nation of people who are just, totally dependent on government.
Well, on the flip side of that, I had this other young kid working for me. He was in an admin role in my office, right? Now, he was on a temporary visa from India while he was studying over here. And he was driving around southeast Queensland on his Indian license, which he's legally allowed to do. He bribed a copper in Mumbai $5 to get that license. It was a 20-year license, so it had a 20-year date on it. And he's legally allowed to drive on that in southeast Queensland. So straight over here, studying at uni, working for us, driving around, and he was doing food deliveries in after hours. Now, contrast that with the kid who was born here, trying to get a license and get into the workforce, really hitting those obstacles. And to me, it was, these two different worlds and these two different setups that we have. Who are we helping here? Are we helping our own citizens? What safety is that if we're allowing this to happen, but we can't let our own kids get a driver's license to get an apprenticeship? So
Yeah,
I know there's a lot, and since I did that story, there's a lot of people that reached out to me going, this is exactly what's happening to me. Or I'm 22, it took me to this long to get my license. It took this long to get the hours up. My family didn't have a car. We couldn't afford the lessons. And if you broke it down, I've got 4 daughters and 3 of them got driver's licenses now. We paid for as many lessons as
You got 4 daughters.
I do.
Sorry, I
know,
got 2.
yeah.
So I'm feeling your pain.
Oh, actually,
Love them. They're adorable.
Yeah, no carpenters in that lot, I might add. Probably a good thing. But having put 3 of them through driving lessons now and getting them to that point and, getting on the road, I've seen the pressure that they've gone through and the failed tests and all the rest of it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, fortunately, we could afford to pay for lessons as well, which helped a lot. But, I grew up in a single mum family. My mum had no money for stuff like that. There was she didn't even have a car herself. So where else would you have got lessons? I know there's some aid programs out there to help disadvantaged kids, which
Everything
is great.
has a cost. This is the thing. Yep. All these government things have unintended consequences and unintended costs. And I bet you any money there's nobody sitting around a boardroom table in a government executive suite going, we need to consider all the unintended consequences of this policy before we bring it in. What would be some of the unintended consequences, folks? Let's workshop that. Nobody's doing that.
That's what we do in business, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
We game out the scenario.
Right, because if we don't, we go broke. But
Yeah.
in government, they don't care. They're not accountable too much. They're accountable once every 4 years. Mate, we've got to take a break. Want to come back. There's another CEO that's very popular out there a lot these days is Matt Barry, the founder of freelancer.com.
Big fan.
And he's been saying some really interesting things. So I want to show a few clips and get your thoughts on that. So we'll come back in a moment. More with Chow on the other side. I want to tell you about a fantastic initiative that's happening out of Canberra right now. It's called the Awards for Men in Leadership. The awards are given out on International Men's Day, which is November 19. They're designed to combat the increasing denigration of masculinity in our culture and the widespread discrimination against males inside and outside the workplace. The goal is to lift the well-being of boys and men and facilitate healthy collaboration between men and women. The awards for men in leadership are designed to inspire men to make a bigger contribution to family and community and to elevate positive male role models. There's a $10,000 scholarship for studies and professional development, public recognition for the winners, and a year of mentorship and executive coaching for each recipient. It's targeted at young men and middle-aged guys who fought their way up from some other kind of disadvantage. This is the 3rd year of the awards and it'll be the biggest yet. To find out more, just search up the Awards for Men in Leadership on Facebook.
The Other Side with Damian Coorey is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed and diving deep on the issues that matter most in around an hour. So you don't miss a thing. Subscribe now to our YouTube channel at Other Side Oz by clicking the button and the bell below the picture frame. And follow us on X now at Other Side Oz. That's AUS at Other Side Oz. It's free. This is The Other Side.
We're joined this week by the CEO and founder of QHI National, one of Australia's biggest home improvement companies, Scott Challen. He's an outspoken critic of our country's excessive love affair with big government and bureaucracy. And he's someone who produces a lot of content online about his views under the handle Shallow Chow on Instagram and X and TikTok. Mate, I saw one of your posts that you got kicked out of the Liberal Party, probably for being too much of a classical liberal and too conservative. That usually is what gets you kicked out of the Liberal Party these days. What happened there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny story. I joined in 22 after Morrison lost the election, and obviously very frustrated with COVID and having seen what's going on with my country. I'm an ex-ADF veteran, so I'm a patriot at heart. Thought I'd get involved, and look, I really did enjoy my time the couple of years that I was in. But one of the reasons I joined the Liberals was because of Gerard Rennick, and his position during COVID. I thought that he was a shining light of free thinking in the Senate that was able to convey a real strong message with regards to freedom and liberty. And so it was
smart
a
economic mind too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, he is a super smart guy. And fortunately, I got to know him quite well during my couple of years in the party. Now, I was at the Liberal Party convention when they ran the coup d'etat and done him over at the convention. He lost by a couple of votes for his Senate reselection. It was a dodgy process. He took the Liberal Party to court. Bit of a backstory there, and I'm sure plenty of people have heard it before.
And there's probably a counter to that story we should point out as well, so I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I hear
course.
things go on in politics.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And look, he lost his position, didn't get the opportunity to run for his Senate seat again, and decided to run as an independent. Now, there were plenty of us in the room in the Liberal Party at two conventions where we watched this unfold who were big fans of Gerard Rennick.
Right.
So what they basically did by pushing him aside was pushed a bunch of us aside. And so, you look, in a cheeky manner, I made a video saying, don't vote for Gerard Rennick, do not vote for this man. And the Liberal Party went, yeah, we're going to kick you out for that. Now, the Liberal Party are very, very scared of alternative media, TikTok and loud voices, especially people like myself with a personality. I've made a ton of content about how bad the Labor Party were and the Albanese government was. They didn't take any of that into consideration. That didn't matter. No. They just went, this one piece of content I made where I said, don't vote for Gerard Rennick in a cheeky way, and they booted me out for that.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I got the call about it, I was right in the middle of helping put together a modular housing policy that we were trying to get through to Janetsky's office about trying to increase housing supply.
That's David Janetsky, the Queensland Treasurer.
Yeah.
The Treasurer. Okay.
Yep. So we were doing good work on the inside to try and solve problems, and bang, out just like that.
Yeah, it's all about. Yeah, well, anyway, we've talked about it a lot on the show, and I want to stick to economics rather than politics this week.
Yeah.
Let's just say we're here.
I thought I could change the beast from the inside, but you can't.
No, a lot of people thought that. Yeah, it's a shame, and maybe it can happen eventually, but there's problems. Hey, I want to talk about Matt Barry. He's a very popular and well-known Aussie tech entrepreneur globally, best known as the founder and CEO of Freelancer.com. He's been on the other side in the past. He's been recognised with lots of awards and things for the tech industry all over the globe, and he shares a lot of your views, the things that you espouse. So I want to just play this clip of Matt from an interview he did with Equity Mates, the Equity Mates podcast, another great podcast a few months back. Have a look.
You would think a country with 1,200 years of coal supply would be an energy superpower. You would think a country with 28% of the world's uranium reserves would be an energy superpower. You would think a country with 20% of the world's gas exports, sometimes number one in the world for gas exports, sometimes number two in the world for gas exports, would be an energy superpower. You would think a country with 3.46 people per square kilometre would have cheap land and cheap housing, right? You would think a country that has, well, what is it? Something like we're third in the world for production of cobalt. We have 47% of the world's lithium production. We are fifth in the world for the production of, sixth in the world for production of copper, fifth in the world for the production of nickel. You'd think we'd be an energy and electronic and mechanical engineering superpower. We control 56% of the world's iron ore exports. You would think we'd be a steel superpower. We have cheap energy and we have abundant iron ore, and we turn that and elaborately transform that and other materials we have to become an export powerhouse, we should be the richest country in the world. Full stop. We have everything, right? But instead, we have the greatest erosion of wealth in the developed world, right? We have a cost of living crisis that is the mother of all cost of living crises. We have house pricing that is astronomically expensive. It doesn't make any sense anywhere around the world. A terrace house in Wallara is the same price as a cruise ship.
Mate, we should be the richest country in the world, right? We should be all just cruising along. I mean, look at the Emiratis in the UAE. All right, they don't pay any tax. They're all driving Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah,
it's like, and here we are.
They've only got oil.
That's right. They've only got oil. We've got coal. We got gas. It takes a lot to screw up a country this lucky, and we're doing a good job of it.
It's taken multiple generations to make it happen, but I think we come back to that safety regulation part of the Australian society. Our psyche is geared up for how safe can we make this place, and by doing that, we've locked ourselves down and signed ourselves up to treaties and organisations that just undermine our ability to be an independent nation and to be sovereign thinkers. We should be an energy superpower around the world. We literally export way more than we use, and we've got all the capacity to create our own industries here. But what did we do? We decided to offshore all of that and undermine the future of our own kids in this country for a housing sector propped up by the world's most profitable banks. And this is what we get.
And you're in that sector, but it's not the economy of that sector is distorted. It's
massively.
Not the building industry. It's not the labourers and the tradies. That industry could actually produce so much more cost effectively, and the problem could be solved.
Yep.
It's the exploitation of that industry by government sucking up 40 to 48% of the cost of every damn house that's built.
Yep.
And with red tape, costs and taxes. And it's the banks.
And we've layered in this net zero compliance stuff that we're heading towards. So the way we
the
build
energy cost,
so the energy savings that have to go into a new home build now, the 7-star energy ratings, not to mention the future proofing for NDIS in the housing code now. We're setting ourselves up for a massive fail. We've built all these costs into the production of a new home that's made houses so unaffordable, and then layered in heaps of people too. Matt makes a really good point. With cheap energy, we could be more competitive, but we won't let ourselves do that because we have to flagellate ourselves on the altar of saving the planet. For some reason, Australia's less than 1% of global emissions is going to make the difference between life and death going forward.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And cheap energy is the crux of everything.
Yep.
If we don't have cheap energy, we don't have cheap anything.
Well, there's a couple of parts to that. Cheap energy is one part of it, but you could look at places in the US, right, where they have really cheap energy and still don't have a manufacturing sector. So what you've got to do is you've got to have the right incentives to build, which is good labour laws, entrepreneurial spirit, incentives for businesses to want to grow, add in cheap electricity, and give us a flexible environment where we can take risks without losing everything if it all goes sideways. Look, I'm a business owner that puts everything on the table every single day when I step into put my boots on and walk out the door. And that's been like that ever since I decided to open the company in 2009. There's a million of us out there. You're doing the same thing yourself, Damian. It's big, it's risky. We are all in on this stuff that we do, and we should be, rewarded and given some incentives to do that, but we're not. We just keep hitting the wall constantly.
Yeah. And Matt Barry says it's all basically this just government policy. It's fixable because so much of it comes down to just stroke of a pen government policy, and we just seem to be run by a political class that doesn't seem to have our best interests at heart.
What we're going to do is we're going to forget how quickly you think governments can pivot. Now, when COVID happened, what happened, mate? Overnight.
Yeah.
We saw things change overnight. Bang, 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 bang. It could be done. All we need here is political will. But we have gutless leaders. We don't have anyone in. There's a couple of great people in there, but their voices are shouted down.
We don't have an opposition.
We don't
have an opposition.
No, we don't.
That's the problem. Let's have a listen to a bit more of Matt from that interview with Equity Mates.
So we have a cost of living crisis caused by input costs such as land and wages, which comes back to land. We have an energy crisis through very poor energy policy, where we'll export all the raw materials to build renewable generators, which are energy negative, on the energy that's consumed to get materials out of the ground, which ship back to us are unreliable, which we can't, and as a result of such, we can't run a reliable manufacturing industry in this country. Manufacturing as a percentage of gross value add is 5.39%, which is on par with Botswana, where you go see cheetahs. It's on par with Liechtenstein, which is a financial haven. It has dropped from about 15, 16, 17, 18, 19% to 5%. It's about 1/3 what of the average is for the OECD. This country is going to hell in a handbasket. We are 93rd in the Harvard Economic Complexity Index in terms of the complexity of things that we produce and how sophisticated they are and how much people can replicate them. Our economy, in terms of sophistication and complexity, is on par with Equatorial Guinea, where they don't have a cinema in the entire country, right? And so it is all being caused by government policy, which can be turned around on a dime.
Yeah. Government policy. It's all been caused by government policy. And that point he makes about our lack of breadth of diversity of industries and things like that, it's a point he's been making since the House of Cards piece that went viral that they wrote a few years back. Yeah. But it's just, it is a house of cards because we don't, it's all built on, housing, which is sitting on top of mining and digging stuff out of the ground, which is fine, but somehow we're just, it's just people on the take. Essentially like in the bureaucracy.
And an ever-growing, bloated blob bureaucracy, I call it. Matt's got a really important voice here, and he makes, he's a successful tech entrepreneur, and he sees these issues, and we need really good, strong leaders who can identify where those problems are, point it out, and then let's get to work trying to fix those problems and those issues. We've had plenty of reviews over the years. The Henry Tax Review should have solved half of these tax problems that we currently have in this country. Got done, spent a bunch of money on it, got put on a shelf, let it sit there. We're going to have a productivity roundtable in August. Are you looking forward to 15% GST?
Yeah, 15% GST.
Are you looking forward to an excuse to import more people into this country? Because this is how they will solve the productivity problem, by telling you that our skills crisis needs to be solved with more people coming in here. Now, that's not going to be a solution. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah, well, it just makes the housing problem worse. 100%. And a 15% GST just makes inflation a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's even harder for the people on the bottom run already.
It's funny how the solution is never to cut the size of government.
Oh, look, I'd be okay with an increase in GST if we offset that with an income tax cut. But as well as I do, Damian, that's not going to happen. Yeah. When they brought in the GST, they were meant to get rid of payroll tax and stamp duty. Yep. What do we still got? Payroll tax and stamp duty. Didn't happen. It doesn't happen. This government is addicted to cash. They will not let go of the money, and they will continue to do everything they can to take a slice off.
All governments are addicted to cash because humans are addicted to cash and self-interest, and that's socialism and why socialism doesn't work. And I don't know why after 200 years we haven't worked that out yet. But anyway, there you go. We'll continue with the message. Mate, thanks very much for coming on. Look forward to having you on the show a bit more regularly.
Pleasure, absolutely. Love your work, Damian. Big fan, and keep doing what you do, mate.
Thanks, mate. Take care. Did you know that with a virtual private network, or VPN, on your computer, tablet or phone, you can log into your favourite streaming services like Netflix from home with an internet address from anywhere in the world and watch all the shows that they offer in other countries, including stuff in different languages? And using a VPN to route all your internet traffic through a third-party server means that big corporations and big government can't spy on you. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they're the best VPN servers out there, as a viewer of The Other Side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/otherside. That's piavpn.com/otherside. It's a great service, a rock bottom price, and supporting our sponsor, you are helping to keep The Other Side going and growing. Something you've probably never heard of if you're not from the formerly wonderful state of Victoria is the URUK Justice Commission. The URUK Justice Commission is Australia's first formal truth-telling inquiry, established in May 2021 as a joint initiative between the Victorian Government and the First People's Assembly of Victoria. That's Victoria's sort of voice to Parliament, even though we did have a little referendum on those things and decided they were racist and divisive and we weren't going to have them. But it seems the good old Socialist People's Republic of the South didn't get the memo. Anyway, named after the Wamba Wamba word for truth, URUK was created to investigate historical and ongoing injustices experienced by First Peoples in Victoria since colonisation. It operates independently and holds the full legal powers of a royal commission. After 4 years, yes, that's right, 4 years of investigation, it's just released its final reports, which document evidence of systemic injustice, including the finding that Victoria's Indigenous population was decimated by up to 95% since 1834 due to mass killings, disease, sexual violence, cultural erasure, and child removal, and the identification of these actions as constituting genocide. As a result of those findings, which are hotly contested, I should point out, the Commission made 100 recommendations aimed at addressing these injustices, ranging from structural reforms to compensation schemes. And these recommendations are non-binding. They're intended to inform future treaty negotiations and systemic reforms. The finding of genocide and the subsequent recommendations have been slammed by critics as patently false, politically motivated, radical, and extreme, among other things. The distinguished commentator and economist Henry Urgas wrote in The Australian this week that the most serious and by far the most depressing aspect of the report is that anyone would take it seriously. He says he doesn't doubt the sincerity of the many Indigenous witnesses that the Commission interviewed, nor does he deny that the encounter between European settlers and Aborigines was tragic in many cases. But he says a commitment to truth-telling imposes weighty responsibilities made all the weightier by the Commission's official status, because no truth is more elusive than that about the distant past. Therefore, any historian's duty is not just to rigorously test the evidence, he writes, but it's also to scrupulously present any authoritative material that speaks against the conclusion that's eventually reached. But this commission didn't do that. It even openly said that truth-telling is not about debate. Henry Urgas notes that nor was there any testing of evidence, presentation of contrary views, or attempt to engage with critics. He says nowhere is that more apparent than in the claimed finding of genocide. He says the Commission cites some historians who examined those claims of genocide, but then it conveniently fails to mention in its report that they largely dispute, often quite strongly, the claim. That isn't history, he says, but tarted up propaganda. Joining me to discuss all of this is Alexandra Marshall, the host of Spectator TV Australia and the editor of Spectator Flat White. Alexandra, great to have you back on the other side.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
100 recommendations from this Victorian Commission. They're good at making recommendations, these commissions. It calls for the establishment of a permanent Indigenous-only voice to Parliament, reparations payments, the exemption of Indigenous Australians from the payment of certain taxes, and as the IPA's Daniel Wild puts it, more land to be locked up purely for the use of Indigenous Victorians and nobody else. He says it's a doctrine for permanent and extreme political and legal separatism and the establishment of a two-tiered society in Victoria to be used as a boilerplate federally. I really hope not. Did they not get the memo about the voice?
Well, the first thing we may notice about the Truth-Telling Commission is it has very little interest in truth. Right. Because if you read what they have based a lot of the entire mission for having this sort of semi-royal commission style event, is that they're retelling Australian history from an activist viewpoint that completely disregards all the positives that came from the settlement and the co-culture that built this wonderful country. It is such a negative worldview to have and to teach our children, which is also inside all these recommendations, is how we're going to present our history so we can create a new future, which, Damian, by the way, is steeped in racism. The idea that we will have racial exemptions from taxation, racial exemptions from public land and our birthright of our natural resources, race-based privileges on jobs and entry in education, all of these things. What I can't understand, Damian, is why hasn't this commission fallen afoul of 18C and our Human Rights Commission, given it is predicated almost entirely on a racist belief?
Yeah. And I think this is something also, just to sort of switch it up a bit here for a second, because it's just popped into my head, Alexandra, but I'm been very pro-Israel, obviously, on this show. I get a little concerned, though, when I hear the Jewish lobby, and it is mainly the left-wing Jewish lobby in Australia, not the right-wing Jewish lobby in Australia, but we've had all these horrible attacks this week and in recent weeks all over the country, which have got to stop, because this is not the place to bring Middle East conflict. Australia is not the place to play that out, and it's unacceptable from anyone. But I do worry when the left-wing Jewish lobby start talking about anti-Semitism and having laws to kind of restrict free speech and to, have all these restrictions on saying these, and they don't think about the fact that that can work against people too, that we've got to stop the whole identity politics thing altogether, right? And including with the Aboriginal question. I mean, we've got to have a future that doesn't see race, that doesn't hold on to past grievance, that moves forward to build the present and the future. Because we're going back generations, like, half a dozen generations. It's nuts to be digging up and thinking that modern Aboriginal people or modern Indigenous people are suffering because of stuff that happened 200 years ago, without looking at some of the benefits that have come in that 200 years as well.
Well, we do not have an Australia lobby. There is nobody lobbying on behalf of Australians or freedom, for that matter. What we have is this crucible of activism where every identity imaginable is now vying for attention, but more importantly, public money with all of their side projects. And they are manipulating Australia and all of our fears in order to gain notoriety. I mean, look at the BLM activists. Look at the environmental activists. How much money is going toward the environment, or more particularly net zero, because of the lobbying of activist groups who stand to profit from that lobbying? But also, you're talking about particularly this crackdown on free speech. It's a little bit worse than that. It's almost a social credit system. I think that Albanese was flirting with the idea yesterday of keeping track of our comments online in a great big AI database, which is a little bit concerning to say the least.
It's terrifying.
But what they are trying to do is solve a policy problem with new legislation. And the policy problem is big Australia. Let's bring as many people as we can in from parts of the world where there are ongoing civil disputes and social disputes and religious disputes that have been happening for thousands of years that we cannot solve in Australia. They brought all these people in here together. They're still fighting amongst each other. And now we're saying, Australians, you have to lose your rights because we've imported these foreign wars and foreign disputes. And Chris Minns, as good as he said that basically the consequence of having a big multicultural Sydney is that you can't have your liberties and freedoms that you were born to.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah. Look, and I mean, it's not like there's no template for this, for where it can head, right? I mean, we've only got to look at the UK right now to see just the appalling state of their freedom of speech liberties being eroded, well, just totally taken away by this evil regime of a Labor government that they've got at the moment, locking people up for having contrary views to the government on social media. Did you ever think you'd see that coming out of the United Kingdom?
Well, Nigel Farage was on Twitter this morning saying that thanks to Sadiq Khan, who was the mayor of London, you cannot leave your house without being robbed. And if you go out of your house wearing a nice wristwatch, well, you'll be killed. That's how bad London has become now with its crime. And also, I sat through the E-Safety Commissioner's National Press Club address.
Poor you.
She was casually, to be fair, Damian, I had to actually read the transcript because I could not listen to her for an hour. But anyway, she was reminded that she might not be able to re-enter the US because the US is cracking down on countries that have a negative approach to free speech. And she seemed to be surprised that there might be consequences for her actions, despite the fact she loves to preach consequences for speech.
Oh, the hypocrisy is profound, and the lack of morality is profound around the idea of preserving free speech. And the attacks, it's like, oh, it's just evil Donald Trump with some evil policy. No, actually promoting the idea of free speech and standing up for free speech and saying if you don't honour that value, you can't come into America is a pretty smart thing to do. We might want to take a leaf out of their book, but we seem to have government and a political class, as you know, this extends into our major opposition party as well, this love of censorship, right?
Well, I thought it was interesting that one of the Jewish lobby groups was saying they reject the new proposal.
Yes, the Australian Jewish...
But what they did is they said it sounded like it was straight out of Donald Trump's playbook, which is really odd because Donald Trump is not in favour of censorship.
No. I don't know. Was that the AJA that said that?
Leap. It was a bit of a strange leap.
I have to talk to David Adler on that. We'll get him on the show and see if that was them. I'm not sure if that was the Australian Jewish Association.
I don't think it was his organisation, but I read that. I went...
Oh, it's a different one. Okay.
The one thing Donald Trump is not in favour of is silencing speech. What he was doing was deporting activists from Harvard and other universities in America who did exactly what you were saying. They were manipulating the education system for the purposes of activism instead of allowing, well, for example, in Australia, our students to get on with the business of learning something useful to bring Australia forward.
Yep. That's exactly right. It's really, I mean, we've got to get our thinking very consistent and clear around this stuff. It's very dangerous if we start to be double-sided on freedom of speech. I mean, you've got to be pretty clear on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And, the traditional line is, are you inciting real violence? And unfortunately, the authorities in the UK have really gone too far the other way, locking people up. And the state of affairs over there is just appalling, and we seem to be heading in the same direction. And AI is dangerous technology, folks. I was listening to something on the radio this morning. The ABC were catching up. There was two hosts, and one of them said, it seems that, this checking of ages online of young people is going to mean that everybody is going to have to go through an age verification online with their social media and hand their real identity over. And it's like, welcome to reality, guys. We've been saying this for a year. You finally worked it out, what this is really about.
But they haven't thought this through at all, Damian.
No. They were shocked. They were stunned and amazed.
No. I mean, it was my birthday yesterday, and women are very sketchy about their ages, okay? They don't really like their friends knowing how old they are, let alone the government or social media. Imagine how upset and victimized we are going to feel when AI gets our age wrong and tells us that we're older than we look.
Oh, that's the other thing. Yes, there's the AI guessing your age. That's the other thing they're going to be doing, looking at your data online and seeing how old you really are. So... the future is not bright for us in terms of our privacy, is it? Great to talk to you.
But really, it's basically Skynet, so we need to be really careful about this.
We do indeed. All right, Alexandra, great to have you on the show once again. We'll have you back very, very soon. Back in a moment. And that is all for this episode of The Other Side, your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. We will see you next Friday night. And clips from this show will, of course, be dropping throughout the week as usual on our YouTube and Rumble channels. But we really do need your support. The best way to get in contact with us and stay in contact with us is to jump onto our website, our independent website, othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for our newsletter there for free. You can also sign up to the exclusive side for less than $5 a month or more if you can help us out to contribute to keeping us going and keeping us growing. I'm Damian Curry. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.
The Other Side with Damian Curry is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month.